howled and lashed against the wooden walls, as if trying to rip the cabin apart. Samuel Drake sat by the fire. Then, suddenly a faint knock echoed through the howling wind. Samuel frowned. In this kind of weather, even wild animals would not dare to roam. He sprang to his feet, walked to the door, opened it, and his heart nearly stopped. On the snow-covered ground knelt two large, muscular Apache women, huddled tightly together. Their lips were purple, their hair frozen to their faces, and their breaths were shallow, like they only had a few left. They were nearly naked beneath scraps of torn cloth. The one in front, Nayeli, lifted her head, her dark golden eyes flickering. She reached out, trying to cling to the doorway. Her voice was hoarse, almost broken. "I need the warmth of a man like you." Everyone turned us away. Samuel froze. His mind urged him to shut the door to avoid trouble, to stay safe. But his heart had seen too many people die in the cold. He bent down and picked up Sahale, the girl who was barely hanging on. Then he wrapped his arms around Nayeli. Their bodies were heavy and cold as ice. As he pulled the door closed, the wind wailed like the cry of darkness being left behind. Samuel said, "I will not leave anyone outside during a storm. Come in." The two women collapsed beside the fireplace, their breathing faint, and Samuel, as he sat down next to them, had no idea that this stormy night would open a whole new path for three souls abandoned by the world. The fireplace glowed red all night. Its warmth spread through the damp, chilly wooden walls. But Samuel could not take his eyes off the two large bodies curled up together on the dry deer hide. Now and then, Nayeli trembled gently, trying to keep Sahale, the one more severely injured, from getting colder. The strong muscles along her shoulders and back shivered violently from the fever. Sahale, on the other hand, breathed in short, shallow bursts, as if a single strong gust of wind might carry her soul away. Samuel placed his hand on their foreheads to check. Ice cold. He slowly pulled another wool blanket over both of them. Inside the small cabin, only the crackle of firewood and the whistling wind seeping through wooden cracks could be heard. The red glow lit up three people. Two Apache women, statuesque like ancient warrior goddesses, and an old rancher whose eyes had seen too much sorrow. On the first morning, Nayeli opened her eyes. She looked around, alert, like a wounded animal. Nayeli said, "Sahale." "Where is she?" Samuel replied. "Right next to you. Still breathing. Slow, but alive." She reached out and gently touched Sahale's face. Her eyes turned red. Nayeli said, "If she dies, I have no one left." Samuel said nothing. He understood that feeling more than anyone. Days passed. Snow still blanketed the windows. Samuel ground herbs, boiled water, changed bandages. The two women were still far too weak to move. He made soup, coaxing them to drink it, spoon by spoon. Though strong, Nayeli often glanced at him with guarded eyes. One evening, as Samuel set the pot of porridge near the fire, Nayeli asked quietly, "Why are you helping us? Every man stays away from my tribe." Samuel did not turn around. He simply pushed the logs deeper into the flames. "I once left someone behind in a storm, and I have regretted it for many years." He paused. "I will not do it a second time." The words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The next day, Sahale fully woke up, her deep black eyes blinking slowly like a lost child. "Sahale." "Where are we?" Samuel replied. "My cabin. The storm has not passed yet. You should stay until you are strong again." She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you, even though I do not know why you would risk helping us." In that small cabin, three wounded souls lived together through the longest winter of their lives. No one asked about the past. They simply shared the fire, the food, and the quiet presence of others who had once been cast aside by the world. Samuel did not know what was changing, but he could feel it clearly. In the warmth of the fire, something was slowly beginning to melt. The storm had not let up. Snow piled thick on the cabin's roof. Inside the wooden room, the warmth from the fire kept the three of them from shivering as they once had, but the silence was slowly becoming heavy. Sahale was now able to sit up, though a long gash still ran down her back. Nayeli was stronger, but her face always seemed to be holding something back. One gray afternoon, as Samuel was feeding more wood into the fire, Nayeli suddenly spoke. "Do you want to know why we were left outside to die?" Samuel did not turn around, but his eyes shifted toward them, through the dim reflection in the mirror. "Only if you want to tell me." Sahale gently touched her sister's shoulder, as if asking permission. Then it was she, the calmer one, who began. "We are not criminals, but we were cast out from the tribe." Samuel. "Why?" A long silence followed. The two sisters looked at each other, an exchange full of years of pain. Sahale. "Because we could not give the chief a child. He is old, his strength is gone, but he blamed the women instead." Nayeli's voice trembled, her hands clenched into fists. The muscles on her strong arms flexed, like trying to hold back her rage. "They said we had no worth. That we did not carry the tribe's blood. That we were not worthy to stay." Sahale lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "They said we were a bad omen, not allowed to exist in winter." Samuel tightened his grip on the piece of firewood. He knew too well the feeling of being pushed away from a place you once belonged. "Samuel, it was not your fault." "Nayeli. But the whole tribe believed it was. They beat us and drove us out. We ran for 2 days, with nothing but our lives." In that moment, Samuel saw it more clearly than ever. These two Apache women, despite their powerful muscles, despite their statuesque warrior-like bodies, carried in their eyes a pain deeper than any winter snow could match. Samuel set the firewood down and stepped closer. "Here, no one sees you as a curse. You are just people trying to survive." Nayeli looked at him for a long time. Her dark golden eyes, once filled with suspicion, now held something else, a small but real flicker of trust. Sahale said, "Are you not afraid of us, Samuel? If you wanted to hurt me, you would have done it the moment you woke up." The two sisters looked at each other, then let out a soft laugh, the first laugh in the cabin since the day they arrived. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside the small room, a truth had just been spoken, and it was like a piece of ice had melted. 3 days later, the snowstorm began to ease. The wind no longer howled, it was now just a soft chill, like winter breathing a quiet sigh. Through the foggy window, Samuel saw a faint glimmer of sunlight behind the thick curtain of clouds. Nayeli stepped up beside him, a thick blanket draped around her shoulders. "The snow is starting to melt," Samuel replied. "Yes. This winter came faster than any I can remember." She tilted her head to look at him, her eyes calm but holding something deeper, something hard to name. Over the past few days, the cabin had become more than just a place to wait out a storm. It had become a shelter for 3 hearts, slowly learning to heal. Sahale laughed more. Nayeli let down her guard, and Samuel felt this house a little less empty. That morning, while the two women still slept, Samuel closed the cabin door, threw on his leather coat, and stepped outside. The snow still reached his knees, but he walked far out behind the pine trees, to a place where the remains of an old foundation still lay. He stood there for hours in silence, then began to rebuild, plank by rotting plank. The steady sound of a hammer echoed across the white landscape, like a quiet declaration he could not yet say out loud. By afternoon, when the snow had stopped falling, Nayeli and Sahale found him standing in the middle of a rough wooden frame. Sahale said, "Samuel, what are you doing?" He set down the hammer and wiped his forehead. "Samuel, building an extra room." Nayeli stepped closer, her hand brushing the new wood, the breeze lifting strands of her hair. "Nayeli. For who?" Samuel looked at them, 2 strong, towering women. Yet in their eyes was a kind of vulnerability he had never seen in anyone else. "For the 2 of you. Or, for the 3 of us, if you want to stay." They stood still. Melting snow dripped from the pine branches above, falling on their shoulders like quiet tears. "Sahale. Are you not afraid? Apache and white people, they are not meant to live together." Samuel shook his head. "I do not care what the world thinks. I only know this place is not just a shelter." Nayeli looked deep into his eyes, her voice low and raspy. "Then how long do you want us to stay with you, Samuel?" Until the snow falls again. Until spring comes. Until you decide to leave. Or never do. Sahale placed her hand on the fresh wood, smiling a gentle smile that looked almost out of place on her strong face. Samuel, we are not going anywhere. Nayeli stepped closer, standing beside him, her breath warm in the winter air. Nayeli said, "If you give us a place to begin again, we will call this place home." And right at that moment, the last patch of snow slid from the cabin roof, as if winter had finally given in, making way for something new. I am deeply grateful for your presence here. If this story brought back memories of dusty afternoons, of hoofbeats echoing in your heart, subscribe to my channel, so that each day we can sit together once more, and I will tell you another story from the West. The snow had stopped falling, but the chill still lingered in every crack of the wooden walls. Samuel's cabin had become the only place in the mountains that still held a rare trace of warmth. After building the extra room, something between the three of them began to shift, in a way that made Samuel pause in his work more than once. Breathing a little slower than usual, in the late afternoons, Sahale would sit on the porch, her large hands carefully sharpening Samuel's hunting knife. The pale sunlight touched her usually stoic face, and somehow, she looked gentler than ever. Nayeli, on the other hand, split firewood. Every swing of her axe was powerful and precise, the muscles in her shoulders moving clearly beneath the fur wrap she wore. There were moments when Samuel looked over at the two sisters and felt for the first time that this cabin truly had life inside it. On a windless afternoon, the three of them sat together on the porch. The sun peeked out through the gray sky, its light faint but warm. Sahale smiled softly as she looked upward. It has been a long time since the sun looked this beautiful. Samuel lifted his gaze in the same direction and replied slowly, "With people here, everything looks brighter. A die. Nayeli turned to him instantly, her expression half serious, half playful. "You mean, the cabin feels less lonely?" The question struck something deep inside Samuel. He did not answer. He simply exhaled. Sahale set the knife down and scooted a little closer, her voice soft, as if afraid to wake the sleeping winter wind. "We see it. Samuel, the sadness in your eyes, it is the same sadness we carry." Samuel lowered his head. Images of his wife and child passed through his mind like pale ghosts behind him. Nayeli moved in closer as well, the warmth of her large body pulling the air tighter around them. She placed her strong hand over the back of his, her voice low and honest. "You opened the door for us that night. No one ever did that. No one ever looked at us as people." Sahale leaned her head gently on Samuel's shoulder, so gently it made his heart tighten. "If it had not been for you, we would have died in the snow." Samuel looked at them both. Their eyes were as strong as the mountains, yet soft as melting ice. He spoke quietly, his voice deep and real. "I opened the door because I know what it feels like to be left outside in the cold night. No one deserves that." Nayeli gave his hand a gentle squeeze. Between the three of them, something was beginning to grow slowly, quietly, and there was no going back. Winter slowly began to retreat. Melted snow trickled down the cabin roof, each drop falling with a quiet rhythm, like the first breaths of life after a long frozen silence. The pine trees surrounding Samuel's home looked greener now, their branches no longer heavy with snow. Inside the cabin, the air had changed too in a way that words could not quite capture. It was no longer just three people living together to survive the storm. It felt more like a home. That morning, Samuel rose early. As he tended to the fire, he heard slow footsteps behind him. Sahale stood there, her hand resting gently on her stomach, her gaze distant. But in her eyes, there was something new, something like astonishment, tangled with hope. She touched his shoulder lightly, her voice soft as morning mist. "Samuel, something feels different inside me." From behind, Nayeli stepped forward, her expression just as strange. She placed a hand over her own belly, as if trying to make sure the feeling was not just her imagination. "Samuel," her voice was low and trembling, "something in us is not the same anymore." "Xi, manly, in 5. Samuel looked at them. Two tall, powerful women once cast out by their tribe as bad omens now stood before him with eyes full of confusion, like children facing something miraculous for the first time. He stepped closer and gently placed his hand over Sahali's. There it was, a warmth. Subtle, small, but real. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. It might be. He did not finish the sentence. But all three of them understood. Nayeli turned to him, her voice husky. If this is real, then it is not the miracle of spring. It is yours. Samuel gently squeezed her hand, his eyes deep and calm. If there is life growing, then it is ours. It belongs to this family. Sahale laughed through her tears. A gentle, aching kind of laugh. I never thought I could belong anywhere, and now there might be an entire life waiting for me. Nayeli stepped in closer, her broad shoulders trembling with emotion. We were cast out for not being able to bear children, but here, we are being given a new beginning. Samuel looked at them both, then to the small cabin bathed in soft golden morning light, and in that moment, he knew. He was no longer a man trapped in old grief. He had two companions, and maybe soon, there would be small breaths joining them. Samuel placed his hands on both of their bellies, and said in a voice steady and strong, like the pine tree outside the cabin, "This is our family. No one can take that away. No one can cast us out ever again." Outside, the early spring sunlight poured through the cabin windows, like a blessing from the earth and sky. Just as spring touched the edge of the mountains, the past of the two women found its way to them. That day, the wind was still. The pine forest stood silent, as if holding its breath. Samuel was checking the fence when he felt a sharp chill crawl down his spine, a gut instinct, the kind only a former soldier who had once stared death in the face could understand. On the damp earth, unfamiliar footprints had appeared. 3 at first, then 5, then more. These were not animal tracks. Someone was watching. Samuel returned to the cabin, his voice low and firm. Someone is coming. Not from around here. Sahale tightened her grip on her sleeve, her deep black eyes darkening. Nayeli glanced out the window, her gaze sharp as an axe blade. They've come for us. The three of them stood side by side, saying nothing more. Within just a few breaths, shadows began to appear at the edge of the forest, familiar figures with long braids, tall spears, and faces painted in tribal patterns. Leading them was an older man, tall and broad, his face cold as carved stone. It was Chief Koa, the one who had cast out Nayeli and Sahale. Nayeli stepped out onto the porch, standing tall like the pine at the top of the hill. Her voice rang out strong, unwavering. "We do not belong to you anymore. We are not coming back." Chief Koa looked at her, then at Sahale, his eyes filled with pride, wounded pride, and the arrogance of a man used to obedience. "When I cast you out, I gave you the honor of dying with dignity in winter." He spoke each word like a blade, driven straight into the heart. "But you chose to live with a white man." Samuel stepped forward, standing between the two women, his voice calm and steady, but without a hint of fear. "They chose to live, and I will not let anyone take them." A warrior behind the chief stepped forward, his eyes burning with warning. But Sahale answered, her voice calm and sharp as ice. "If you came to take us back, you are too late. The day you drove us out, we stopped being yours." Nayeli added, her voice hard with resolve, "We have a new family now. And this time, no one will take it from us." Chief Koa looked at the three of them standing together. He looked into the eyes of the two women, eyes that once bowed to him, now solid as mountain stone. His grip tightened on his spear. His breath trembled, just for a moment. Samuel stood firm. "Leave," he said, his voice low but powerful, like thunder. "No one here belongs to you." The forest went still. The Apache warriors looked to their chief, waiting for his command. But instead of stepping forward, Koa turned away. He said nothing. They had come with threats, but they left in silence. As their figures disappeared into the pine woods, Sahale collapsed to her knees, exhaling a heavy breath. Nayeli placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, and Samuel stood shielding them both, like even if the sky fell, he would hold it up. A family had just passed its first great trial, and no one, not an old tribe, nor any storm could ever break them apart again. As the shadows of Chief Koa and the old warriors disappeared into the pine forest, the entire world seemed to exhale. A spring breeze swept through, carrying the scent of warm pine and freshly thawed earth. The last bit of winter's snow slipped from the cabin roof, landing on the damp ground with a soft thud like a quiet knock marking the end of something. Samuel stood still on the porch, his calloused hands still trembling slightly from the tension. But when he turned around, he saw Nayeli helping Sahale to her feet. The two women leaning on each other like great trees that had survived the storm. Their eyes met his warm, trusting, and full of choice. Sahale spoke softly, her voice still tight with emotion. "You stood in front of us, even when it could have cost you your life." Nayeli stepped closer, her broad shoulders bathed in the light of the setting sun. "No one has ever done that for us. No one." Samuel said nothing. He simply stepped forward and placed a hand on both their backs, a simple gesture, yet full of meaning. "We made it through," he said, slow and steady. "And from this day on, no one will ever cast you out again." The evening passed in a strange, gentle stillness, not heavy, but warm, like the earth itself taking a breath. They shared a simple dinner, stewed venison, cornbread, and herbal tea. Every glance exchanged at that table felt lighter, brighter, as if spring was not only blooming outside but inside each of them. As the fire inside the cabin crackled higher, Sahale sat close to Samuel, placing her hand softly over his. "Family is not where you are born. It is where no one leaves you behind." Nayeli smiled a strong, hopeful smile. "And we found it, Samuel. Right here, outside." The sky turned a shade of amber, streaked with thin, silky clouds. The small wooden cabin sat nestled deep in the valley, and the light inside it was warmer than the spring sun. Samuel wrapped his arms around the two strong women who had saved his life in ways he never expected. "We will raise our children here," he said gently, but firmly. Like a vow, they will grow up afraid of no one, running from nothing. Nayeli and Sahale leaned their heads on his shoulders like two taut strings that had finally been allowed to loosen. The spring wind danced across the meadow, stirring the tender buds just beginning to bloom. And inside the cabin, the three souls the world once cast aside sat together as a family chosen by the earth and sky. No ceremony, no grand promises, just a simple truth. They had found each other, and they had chosen one another, in the spring of a brand new life. My friends, there are wounds we believe will follow us for the rest of our lives, old memories, bitter winters that linger in the heart. But then love appears not loud, not dazzling, just quietly, like a small flame in the cold night. It does not erase the past, but it gives us the courage to face it, without trembling. In that it agrees. Love is not magic, but it knows how to mend what has been broken. It puts the pieces back together to make someone new, warmer, stronger, and brave enough to believe that happiness is still waiting just ahead. It has been a true honor to share this story with you. I only hope that wherever you are, peace and happiness find you. I love you, my dear listeners of Wild West Storytelling. Tell me how you felt about this story in the comments below. Type the number 8